Hey there, it's Elle. I'm here to share a story that changed the way I look at family boundaries and what it really means to take care of yourself. This past Thanksgiving, I had a moment that I never expected. I've spent my whole life working hard, putting in the hours, doing everything I could to support my family, especially my sister Serafina. I helped her with everything: her textbooks, her rent, even her college tuition. No questions asked. Because that's what family does, right? We support each other, no matter what. But this year, I found myself left out, abandoned, rejected. And not just by anyone, by the very people I had been there for time and time again. It wasn't some random misunderstanding or accident. No, it was deliberate, and it stung. You see, sometimes, even the people we love the most can hurt us. And it took me a long time to realize that love isn't always unconditional. It isn't always what we expect it to be. We're taught that family comes first. But what do you do when family starts making you feel less than? It took years of sacrifice, of putting others' needs above my own, before I finally understood something important. Family should never come at the cost of your own peace. And sometimes the hardest decision you'll make is choosing yourself. So let me tell you about how I learned that lesson. How I went from being the one who always gave, always helped, to someone who finally learned how to stand up for herself. This story isn't just about me. It's about every single person who's ever felt like they were never enough. Every one of us who's ever been taken for granted or overlooked simply because we didn't fit someone else's idea of good enough. If you've ever been in a situation where you've given everything only to realize it was never enough to make someone truly see you, then this story is for you. Let me take you on a journey of self-discovery, tough decisions, and reclaiming what's mine. It's not just a story of family drama. It's a story of choosing yourself. Even when it feels like you're breaking all the rules, Thanksgiving has always been a special time for our family. Growing up, it was one of those holidays where everything felt right. The table was always full. The house smelled like my mom's cooking, and the laughter flowed like wine. I always felt like part of something bigger, something warm and comforting, like I was included in a tradition that meant something. But that's not what happened this year. It all started like any other Thanksgiving preparation. I'd gotten the call from Mom about what pie to bring, pecan or pumpkin. The usual conversation with her lighthearted tone, guiding me through what I needed to do. As an HVAC tech, my schedule is always packed, but I always made time for family. Thanksgiving, after all, was a day to give thanks, right? A time to come together and celebrate the people you love and the blessings you have. But when I got the call that night, something was off. Mom's voice was different, almost hesitant. I didn't pick up on it at first, but looking back, I should have known. She was never this cautious, never so careful with her words. And then she said it. The words that would change everything. "We think it would be best if you skipped dinner this year," she said, and I could almost hear her shifting uneasily in her chair. "What do you mean, skip dinner?" I asked, confusion washing over me. "We always do Thanksgiving together." I could hear her sigh, and I could almost picture her pacing in the kitchen, trying to come up with the best way to explain herself. "Well, it's just that we're keeping things a little more formal this year," she continued. "Serafina's boyfriend is bringing his parents, and we just thought it might be better if it was just close family." I sat there, gripping the steering wheel of my truck, as the world around me felt like it was shifting. "What, Mom? I am close family." She immediately backpedaled, her words hurried, like she could sense the growing tension. "Of course you are, sweetheart. It's just that you know how these professional families are. It's important for Serafina to make a good impression." And there it was. The unspoken truth hanging between us. My life, my job, my work. It wasn't up to their standards. I didn't wear a suit and tie to work every day. I didn't have the kind of polished career they thought I should have. My blue-collar job, something I took pride in, wasn't good enough to sit at the dinner table. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it wavered with the anger building inside of me. "So, because I don't wear a suit, I'm not good enough to sit at the table with you guys? I've been paying for Serafina's college for years, and now this." She didn't respond. That silence hit me harder than anything she could have said. I could feel my chest tightening with frustration, but I stayed calm. "This is about appearances, isn't it? You're ashamed of me, aren't you?" Her reply was quick, too quick. "No, honey, it's not like that." But I knew I could feel it. I wasn't good enough for them anymore, and it hurt in a way I couldn't quite describe. This was the family I had spent so many years helping. I had supported Serafina through college, making sure she never had to worry about a thing. And now, in the name of good impressions and social standing, I wasn't welcome. I hung up, staring at my phone, the weight of her words sinking in. This wasn't just about one dinner. It was about everything I had sacrificed for them. And in that moment, I realized something that hit me like a freight train. I was never going to be enough for them. As Thanksgiving Day drew closer, I tried to push the feeling aside. I told myself it was just one dinner, one mistake, and that things would go back to normal. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I wanted to go back to normal anymore. I wasn't going to sit around feeling sorry for myself. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at their table. But what I didn't expect was that the truth would hit me in the form of a text message from my cousin Genevieve. The message shook me to my core. "I overheard Mom and Serafina talking. She wrote Serafina told her she didn't want you there because she was afraid it would make her look bad in front of Dorian's parents," she said. And I quote, "I don't want them to think we come from a working-class background." Those words were like a punch to the gut. My own sister, the one I'd spent years supporting, was ashamed of me, ashamed of the very job that paid her tuition, bought her textbooks, and kept a roof over her head. I had known there were signs, little things that made me feel like I wasn't included. But this was the truth I couldn't ignore anymore. Thanksgiving came, and for the first time, I spent it alone. It wasn't because I wanted to, but because I had been told I wasn't welcome. I drove aimlessly through the streets, trying to distract myself, but all I could think about was the table that didn't have a seat for me. That evening, I made the mistake of checking social media. There it was, my family's perfect Thanksgiving dinner. Serafina, her boyfriend Dorian, and his parents, all smiles and polished for the camera. And there I was, nowhere to be seen. That's when something inside me changed. If I wasn't good enough to sit at their table, then I sure as hell wasn't good enough to pay for Serafina's tuition anymore. And that's when I made a decision that would alter everything. The morning after I made my decision, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Clarity. It wasn't a wave of relief, but more like a heavy weight being lifted. I didn't have to keep pretending that things were okay. I didn't have to keep bending over backwards for people who never seemed to truly see me. That day, I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, the warm steam rising from the mug. I stared at my laptop, the familiar university payment portal open in front of me. Serafina's tuition balance was staring back at me. $21 or $500, it was the number I'd kept paying for the last few years. The number I had promised to keep funding without hesitation. But that was before Thanksgiving. That was before the realization hit me that my sister, the one I had been helping, was ashamed of me. Ashamed of the life I had built. The life that, quite frankly, had allowed her to chase her dreams without worry. And all of a sudden, it became clear to me I was no longer willing to be the person who kept holding everyone up while they ignored my existence. I wasn't going to keep sacrificing my peace for a family that only valued me when they needed something. My fingers hovered over the trackpad as I looked at that number one more time. The feeling that surged through me wasn't anger. It wasn't bitterness, even though I had every right to be angry. No, it was something more powerful. Freedom. The freedom to make a choice that put me first. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to take that step. I clicked the button to remove myself as the payer on her account. A small pop-up appeared on my screen, asking if I was sure about this action. The words, "This action cannot be undone," sat there, but I didn't hesitate. I clicked, yes. And just like that, I removed myself from the payment plan I had been tied to for so long. The second the laptop snapped shut, my phone buzzed. I saw my mom's name flash across the screen. and I let it ring. I couldn't face her right then. Not when I was still trying to gather the pieces of myself. The phone rang again, and then again, but I stayed still. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I didn't owe her an explanation. Not this time. But then came the message. The text that had me questioning everything. Genevieve had sent me a message the night before, and I knew it was important. I didn't want to open it, but I couldn't help myself. My heart dropped as I read what she had overheard. Serafina told Mom she didn't want you at Thanksgiving because she was afraid it would make her look bad in front of Dorian's parents, she said. I don't want them to think we come from a working-class background. The words stung, and I couldn't help but feel the ache spread through me. All this time I had been there for Serafina, helping her get through law school, paying for everything, sacrificing my own happiness for hers, and she was ashamed of me. She couldn't even own up to the fact that I was the one who had been holding her up. I thought back to all the signs I had ignored, the way she never invited me to her college events, the way she always avoided saying what I did for a living in front of her friends, the way she'd never introduced me to her boyfriend, even though they'd been dating for almost a year. I had told myself I was being paranoid, making excuses, but now the truth was undeniable. The phone buzzed again. It was from Serafina, and for the first time I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what she had to say, but I had to answer. I picked up the phone and heard her voice, frantic, shaking. Please, you can't do this. You can't just stop paying my tuition. I can't graduate without it. You don't understand. This is everything to me. I sat there for a moment listening to her voice crack with desperation, and part of me wanted to give in. Part of me wanted to go back to the person I had been, the one who always helped, always said yes, always took care of her. But I wasn't that person anymore. Not after everything that had happened. I finally spoke, my voice steady but firm. I've been paying for everything, Serafina, for years, and I've never asked for anything in return. But I'm done. I'm done being the one who sacrifices while you turn your back on me. This isn't just about money. This is about respect. She didn't know how to respond to that. She had expected me to cave, to give in to her like I always had. But this time I wasn't backing down. I hung up the phone and sat there, the weight of my decision settling in. I had done it. I had actually made the choice to stop enabling her, to stop being the one who paid the price for everyone else's mistakes. And I didn't feel guilty. At least not as much as I thought I would. The silence that followed was almost peaceful. For the first time in ages, I felt like I was in control of my life. Like I had finally broken free from the toxic cycle I had been living in for so long. But the peace didn't last long. The next day, the calls started coming in. From Mom, from Dad, from Aunt Delilah, from everyone. They were all asking the same thing. Why did you do this? Why did you cut Serafina off? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. They didn't understand. They never would. And just as I was starting to think I could breathe easy, another message popped up on my phone. This one was from Serafina. The message was short, but it was filled with venom. I hope you're happy. You just ruined my life. That one hit harder than I expected. I had hoped that when Serafina realized the consequences of her actions, she would change. But I was wrong. She didn't see what she had done to me. She didn't see how her actions had torn me apart, how her pride and selfishness had pushed me away. But there was no going back now. The realization hit me. Serafina wasn't the only one who was going to have to learn a lesson. This was the moment I had to teach her and my entire family something that they'd never expected. I wasn't going to be their doormat anymore. The silence that followed my decision to cut off Serafina's tuition payments was deafening. It wasn't the peace I had imagined. It wasn't the weightlessness of freedom. No. This silence felt like a void, an empty space where family had once been, now replaced with guilt, judgment, and the lingering echoes of my mother's voice. The calls came relentlessly, first from Mom, then from Dad. They both left voicemail after voicemail, each one tinged with frustration, disappointment, and the same desperate plea. You can't just leave Serafina hanging like this. She's your sister. She needs you." I couldn't even bring myself to listen to them all. I knew what they were going to say. The same tired excuses, the same rehearsed lines about family being there for each other, no matter what. But I had heard it all before. By the time the fourth call came in, I had already made up my mind I wasn't going to cave. I wasn't going to go back to the person I had been, the one who always bent over backward, always put everyone else first, always allowed myself to be used. Still, a small part of me wondered if I'd made the right decision. I couldn't help but feel the sting of being labeled the villain. The family I had once been so close to now saw me as cold, selfish, even cruel. How had things gotten so twisted? But the next few hours gave me clarity. I could no longer be the person who apologized for standing up for myself. I had done the right thing. It wasn't cruelty, it was self-preservation. For the first time, I wasn't sacrificing my needs for someone else's comfort. And that in itself was enough. But then came Serafina's social media posts, the ones that painted her as the victim, the poor girl whose sister had suddenly abandoned her, whose family had left her to fend for herself. The comments were filled with sympathy, with people voicing their disbelief and outrage over my actions. How could a sister do this to her own flesh and blood? One post read, "Some people are just heartless. No family loyalty." It was the same old story. The world always sees the side of the person who's the loudest, the one who plays the victim card the best. And here was Serafina playing the part to perfection. The worst part. There were people I knew in those comments, family, friends, acquaintances, who hadn't bothered to check in on me, who hadn't asked how I was holding up when I was left out of Thanksgiving dinner. But now they were all rallying behind her, as if she was some poor, helpless soul. It didn't take long before the calls started pouring in again. The messages, the guilt-tripping. Then came the real bombshell. Genevieve, my cousin, sent me a text, her voice filled with a quiet seriousness. Serafina moved back home," she wrote. "She's taking a break from school, but your parents, they're struggling financially. They won't admit you were right, but I think they know you were." I stared at the message for a while, the words echoing in my head. Serafina had always been able to hide behind the money I'd sent her way, pretending like she had it all together. But now that the money had stopped, she was forced to face reality. And so were my parents. For all the years they had enabled her, for all the times they had allowed her to treat me as though I didn't matter. Now they had no one else to blame but themselves. But it didn't stop there. The pressure kept mounting. The guilt kept coming. My mom left me a voicemail, and I didn't even want to hear it. I knew it would be the same as always. Her voice dripping with false concern, guilt, and manipulation. I let it ring. Then the second voicemail came, and the third. I finally picked up the phone, my grip on it tight. Why are you doing this? Serafina can't handle this on her own," my mom said, her voice desperate. "She's just young. She doesn't know what she's doing. You have to help her." I took a deep breath, closing my eyes. I could feel the anger bubbling up, but I didn't let it take over. I had heard this too many times, and this time I wasn't going to fall for it. "I'm done," I said flatly. "I've been helping her for years. I've sacrificed everything for her, and she's treated me like I don't even exist. I'm done cleaning up after her." My mom tried to argue, but I just couldn't do it anymore. The guilt-tripping, the manipulation, the constant pressure to give, to sacrifice, to put myself last. For what? So Serafina could continue living in a fantasy where she didn't have to face any of her own mistakes, so I could continue being the one to pay for her perfect little life. No, not anymore. After that call, I didn't hear from them for a while. The messages slowed and the guilt-tripping came to a halt, but I knew what would come next. Serafina had always been the one who would come crawling back when things didn't go her way, and I knew this time would be no different. I was right. Less than 24 hours later, I was standing in the middle of my shop, making sure everything was locked up for the night when the door swung open. I looked up and there she was, Serafina. Her hair was wild, her eyes were red from crying, and her expression was one of pure fury. "You ruined my life!" she screamed as she stormed in. I stood there, my arms crossed, and waited. She tried to make herself sound like the victim, but I wasn't having it anymore. I wasn't the person who was going to put up with it. "You abandoned me," she spat, her voice sharp with anger. "You left me with nothing. How could you do this to me?" I raised an eyebrow and stepped forward, my voice calm but firm. "How could I do this to you, Serafina? How could you lie to me for years? How could you act like I didn't matter just because I'm not the person you want me to be?" Her face faltered just for a second, but she recovered quickly. "You don't get it, Elle," she said, her voice faltering slightly. "I was trying to protect you. You don't understand the world I'm trying to be a part of. It's not about you. It's about appearances." And there it was, the ugly truth. All along, it wasn't about family. It was about status. It was about keeping up appearances, and I wasn't going to be the one to play along anymore. Not for her. Not for anyone. The silence after Serafina left my shop was suffocating. The tension in the air felt thick like a storm cloud hanging over everything. I watched her go, knowing this wasn't just a fight. It wasn't even just a break in our relationship. This was the end of something. Something I couldn't keep pretending was healthy or normal, or even worthy of my energy anymore. But still a part of me waited for the world to come crashing down. I had made my decision, but I wasn't blind to the consequences. I knew how this story usually went. The people who were supposed to love you, the ones you bent over backward for the ones you sacrificed your own happiness for, they never really let go of the strings they had tied around you. I had cut those strings, but I knew they'd be back, and they were. The calls came, of course, but this time I didn't answer them right away. I let them ring out, one after the other, a steady rhythm in the background of my life. At first I thought I might be strong enough to ignore it completely, but as the hours wore on, I felt a small crack open up in my resolve. I couldn't help myself. I had to know what they wanted. I had to see if my mom would guilt-trip me again, or if my dad would try to make it about family. So I picked up the phone, not knowing what to expect, but already bracing for the inevitable. It was Mom, of course. Her voice, once filled with a certain warmth, now sounded brittle, strained. "Elle, you need to come to your senses." She started her words, cutting through the quiet like a knife. "You can't just leave Serafina like this. You have to understand she's young. And this wasn't supposed to happen." I closed my eyes, trying to remain calm. "You mean this wasn't supposed to happen when I stopped funding her life?" I asked, a sharp edge to my voice. "When I stopped being her personal bank account?" Mom paused. It wasn't the response I was expecting. She usually had something to say, something to justify the situation, to explain away the manipulative tactics, the guilt trips, the way they had treated me. But there was only silence on the other end of the line. "You've been covering for her for years, Elle," she said. Finally, her voice quieter, more tentative. "You've been her safety net. She didn't ask for any of this." I wanted to scream. "She didn't ask for any of this." I repeated, incredulous. "What about me? Who asked me if I wanted to live my life like a glorified ATM? Who asked me if I was okay with being ignored, being erased as long as my money was good?" My mom's sigh on the other end of the line made my chest tighten. "Elle, please. She's your sister. She needs help." I felt a coldness wash over me. "No, Mom. What Serafina needs is accountability. She needs to grow up and understand that life doesn't revolve around her image, that money doesn't solve every problem, and it doesn't mean I should be the one left to pick up the pieces every time she makes a mess of things." But she wasn't hearing me, not really. She wasn't hearing the pain in my voice, the frustration that had been building for years. She only saw Serafina, the baby, the one who needed saving, and I was just the provider, the one who could be taken for granted. Time and time again. I ended the call, the anger still bubbling under the surface, and I knew deep down that this was only the beginning. I wasn't just fighting Serafina anymore. I wasn't even just fighting my mom. I was fighting a whole narrative, a story that had been written over the years where I had always been the one who gave, the one who sacrificed. It was a story that I had let define me without even realizing it, and now I had to rewrite it. I spent the next few days in a daze of sorts, trying to make sense of it all. The quiet was unbearable at times. The loneliness felt like a weight pressing down on my chest, especially when I was alone in my apartment after a long day of work, with nothing but the hum of the city outside to keep me company. But something shifted inside me during those days. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I started to realize that the silence wasn't a punishment. It was freedom. It was the first time I wasn't fighting to prove my worth to someone who didn't even see it. It was the first time I wasn't bending over backward to be accepted by a family that had spent years making me feel like I wasn't enough. I didn't need to prove anything to them anymore. That realization hit me like a wave, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of relief. A weight I hadn't even known I was carrying started to lift. And in its place, peace. The kind of peace that comes when you stop trying to fix things that were never yours to fix in the first place. But peace never comes without its own challenges. Just when I thought I had everything figured out, the next wave hit the texts, the calls, the messages. They came flooding in, sometimes from familiar faces, sometimes from people I barely knew, all with the same question: why are you doing this? She's your sister. You're just going to let her fail. The messages from family were especially painful. Aunt Delilah, Uncle Larry, they all chimed in with their versions of tough love. But none of them had ever really seen what was happening behind the scenes. None of them had ever taken the time to ask how I was feeling. They just assumed that because I had the money, I had to give it. Because I was the older sister, I had to sacrifice for her. Because I was family, it was my job to help. And that's when I realized I had spent my entire life being told that family was everything. But what happens when that family doesn't respect you? When they only take, without ever considering your needs, your sacrifices, your own humanity. I wasn't going to let that narrative control me anymore. The day I saw the posts on social media, I knew it was time to make one final stand. Serafina had painted me as the villain again. And this time, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. It was time to take control of the story. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their guilt trips. All I needed was the strength to move forward, to choose my peace over their chaos. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. It's strange how quickly everything can change when you finally stop letting others define you. In the weeks that followed, I kept my distance from the drama, my life, my business, my peace. It all began to fall into place in a way I'd never experienced before. For the first time in years, I wasn't constantly questioning myself, second-guessing my decisions, or sacrificing my own happiness for someone else's approval. But even though I was moving forward, I knew Serafina wouldn't give up so easily. She had always relied on me, on my money, my sacrifices, my silence. And without that, her carefully constructed world was starting to crumble. It wasn't just about tuition anymore. It was about the whole life she had built on the backs of my hard work, my sweat and my tears. And now that she was being forced to face the consequences of her actions, she didn't know how to handle it. I wasn't surprised when the calls came again. But this time they felt different. They weren't filled with anger or guilt trips. Instead, they carried a quiet desperation, a tone that seemed almost defeated. The first one came late at night, when I was already winding down from a long day. It was from Serafina. I didn't pick up right away. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear what she had to say. But after a few minutes of internal wrestling, I hit the green button and answered. "Elle, please." Her voice cracked raw with emotion. "I'm sorry. I don't know what to do anymore. I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything." Her words caught me off guard. Serafina had never apologized to me like this before. In the past, any sign of regret was always followed by excuses, justifications, or attempts to manipulate me into doing what she wanted. But this felt different. This time, she wasn't asking for anything. She wasn't trying to fix the situation with money, or by playing the victim. She was just sorry. "I've lost everything, Elle," she continued, her voice shaky. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. And now I don't know where to turn." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Part of me wanted to rush in and fix things for her, to save her like I always had. But I knew better now. I knew that saving her wasn't my job anymore. She had to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet, just like I had to learn. "I know you're struggling," I said, my voice calm, steady. "But Serafina, you have to understand something. I've spent my whole life making excuses for you. I've paid for your education. I've taken care of you. I've made sure you never had to face the consequences of your choices. But you're an adult now, and you have to take responsibility for your own life." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her thinking, processing the weight of my words. When she finally spoke again, her voice was softer, quieter. "I know," she said almost too quietly. I don't know how to fix everything. I don't know how to make it right." For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the start of something new. Maybe, just maybe, Serafina could change. But even if she didn't, I knew I had already done what I needed to do. I had chosen myself. I had stopped enabling the cycle of guilt and manipulation. And that was enough. "I can't fix everything for you, Serafina," I told her, my voice steady. "But you can start by taking responsibility for your choices. You can start by accepting the consequences, no matter how hard they are. And maybe, just maybe, you can learn to do things differently from now on." The silence on the other end of the line wasn't uncomfortable this time. It was reflective. After a few moments, she spoke again, quieter, but with more conviction. I'll try to do better." That was all I needed to hear. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had given Serafina the space to grow up. I wasn't going to be her safety net anymore, but I could still offer her something more valuable than money or material support. I could offer her the truth, and that, I hoped, would be enough. A few days later, I received an unexpected message from my cousin, Genevieve. She had been keeping me updated on the fallout from the family. Apparently, Serafina had moved back home. Her parents struggling to accept the reality of what had happened, but they weren't blaming her, not yet. Instead, they were blaming me. That was to be expected, of course. People always need someone to point the finger at when things go wrong. But this time, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. I had already made my peace with my decision. And in the end, it didn't matter what they said. It didn't matter what anyone else thought. I had learned to stop seeking their approval, their validation. I had learned to stand firm in my choices, to trust my instincts, and to value my own peace above all else. The holiday season came and went, and for the first time in years, I celebrated it without the burden of guilt hanging over my head. I spent time with friends, reconnected with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. And while the tension with my family still lingered, it no longer controlled me. Eventually, I learned that family is not just about blood. It's about respect. It's about mutual care and understanding. And when that respect is absent, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to set boundaries, to say no, to protect yourself. I learned that choosing myself was the most powerful thing I could ever do. And for the first time in my life, I was truly free. Conclusion: choosing yourself isn't easy. It isn't always popular, but it's necessary. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. And when that happens, we have two choices. We can keep allowing ourselves to be hurt, or we can walk away. I chose to walk away. And in doing so, I found something I had been searching for all my life: peace. So if you're in a situation where you're constantly giving, but never receiving, where you're always sacrificing, but never appreciated, remember this: it's okay to choose yourself. Your worth isn't tied to what others expect from you. It's tied to who you are, to the strength it takes to say no, and to the courage it takes to walk away from toxicity. You deserve peace. You deserve respect. And you deserve to live a life that's yours and yours alone.